January 1945. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower walks into his office at Versailles for a meeting with Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. For months, Montgomery has been complaining, criticizing, and publicly undermining Eisenhower's strategy. He's claimed credit for American victories. He's lobbied Churchill to give him overall command. He's treated American generals like incompetent subordinates. And today, Eisenhower has had enough. What happens in that room will end Montgomery's influence over American forces forever. It's the moment when the diplomatic, patient Supreme Commander finally stops being diplomatic and patient. The moment when Eisenhower makes it brutally clear, shut up, fall in line, or get out. If you love the untold confrontations that shaped history, hit that subscribe button now, because this is the clash that almost tore the Allied command apart. To understand why Eisenhower finally snapped, you need to understand what led to this moment. Montgomery had been a problem since North Africa. Brilliant tactician? Absolutely. Careful planner who won battles? Without question. But also impossibly arrogant, politically tone-deaf, and utterly convinced that he should be running the entire war. After D-Day, Montgomery commanded all Allied ground forces during the initial invasion, but by September 1944, Eisenhower took direct command of ground operations. Montgomery was furious. He believed he alone had the military genius to lead the final push into Germany. From that moment on, Montgomery became a constant thorn in Eisenhower's side. He criticized Eisenhower's broad front strategy, arguing instead for a single concentrated thrust into Germany under his command. He lobbied Churchill constantly. He gave press conferences that subtly undermined American leadership. He treated Bradley and Patton with barely concealed contempt. Then came the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. When Eisenhower temporarily put two American armies under Montgomery for operational efficiency, Montgomery saw it as vindication. He believed it proved that American commanders couldn't handle crisis situations without British supervision. On January 7, 1945, Montgomery held his infamous press conference where he essentially claimed credit for saving the Americans from disaster. American generals were livid. Omar Bradley threatened to resign rather than serve under Montgomery again. Patton wanted to challenge him to a duel. The alliance was fracturing, and Eisenhower knew he had to act decisively. The exact date of the confrontation isn't recorded in official documents, for good reason. What happened in that room was too explosive to put in writing. But we know it happened sometime in mid-January 1945, shortly after Montgomery's disastrous press conference. Multiple sources, Eisenhower's naval aide Harry Butcher, his chief of staff Walter Bedell Smith, and later accounts from British officers, all confirmed that Eisenhower called Montgomery to his headquarters for a private meeting. According to Butcher's diary, Eisenhower prepared for the meeting by telling Smith, "I'm done being diplomatic with Monty. If he can't accept my authority, then he can go home." Smith, who dealt with Montgomery's complaints for months, reportedly replied, "About damn time, sir." When Montgomery arrived at Eisenhower's headquarters in Versailles, he expected another strategic discussion, perhaps another opportunity to press his case for a single thrust into Germany under his command. What he got instead was something he'd never experienced before. Eisenhower at his absolute limit. The meeting lasted about 30 minutes. No official transcript was kept, but based on accounts from those who were briefed immediately afterward, we can reconstruct what happened. Eisenhower didn't waste time with pleasantries. He started by addressing Montgomery's press conference directly. "Your remarks to the press have caused serious damage to Allied unity. American generals are furious. American newspapers are calling for your dismissal, and I'm not sure I disagree with them." Montgomery tried to explain that he'd been praising American troops, that the press had misunderstood his intentions. Eisenhower cut him off. "I don't care about your intentions. I care about results. And the result is that you've made the Americans question whether this is truly a partnership or whether we're just here to provide men and material for British glory." Then Eisenhower said something that must have shocked Montgomery. "You seem to believe you should be running this campaign. You've made that clear in every conversation we've had since September. So let me make something equally clear. You're not running this campaign. I am. And if you can't accept that, then I'll ask Churchill to relieve you of command." According to one account, Montgomery started to protest, to explain his strategic reasoning, to argue why his approach was superior. And that's when Eisenhower delivered the line that would become legendary among those who heard about it secondhand. Eisenhower stood up from his desk. He looked Montgomery directly in the eye, and he said words to this effect. The exact phrasing varies in different accounts, but the meaning is unmistakable. "Bernard, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to understand that I mean every word. You have two choices. You can accept my command authority without reservation, stop lobbying Churchill for my job, stop criticizing American generals, and stop giving press conferences that undermine Allied unity. Or you can refuse, and I will personally request your relief from command. Those are your only options, what Churchill calls shutting up or getting out." The phrase "shut up or get out" apparently came from Churchill himself, who'd used similar language when warning Montgomery about the damage his press conference had caused. Eisenhower was now delivering the same message with the full weight of Supreme Allied Command behind it. But Eisenhower wasn't finished. "I need to be clear about something else," he continued. "The American Army is now the dominant force in this theater. We're fielding more divisions, providing more equipment, and taking more casualties than Britain. That's not a criticism, it's a fact, and it means that American concerns carry weight. When American generals tell me they can't work with you, I have to listen. When American newspapers question the alliance because of your statements, I have to respond." Then came the most devastating part. "You're a brilliant tactician. No one disputes that. But you lack political judgment, and in a coalition war, political judgment matters as much as tactical skill. I've defended you repeatedly, after the slapping incidents with Patton, after your slow advance at Kane, after countless complaints from American commanders. But I can't defend you anymore. Not after this." Montgomery, according to accounts, went pale. He'd never been spoken to like this. Not by Eisenhower. Not by anyone. What Montgomery said next reveals how completely Eisenhower had caught him off guard. Montgomery apparently tried one last time to salvage his position. "I was merely trying to give an accurate account of the battle," he said. "The northern sector was under my command. I had operational control." "I don't care. This isn't about operational details. This is about whether you understand your role in this alliance. You're not the supreme commander. You're a subordinate commander. An important one, a valuable one, but a subordinate nonetheless. And if you can't accept that role with grace and humility, then you're no longer useful to me." Then Eisenhower laid out exactly what he expected going forward. "I need you to coordinate with Bradley as an equal, not as a superior. You will stop lobbying Churchill for changes to the command structure, you will clear any press statements through my headquarters before making them, and you will conduct yourself in a manner that reinforces Allied unity rather than undermining it. If you agree to these terms, then we'll move forward together. If you don't agree, then I'll speak to Churchill this afternoon and request your relief. The decision is yours, and I need an answer now." Montgomery had no choice. He knew Churchill wouldn't back him, not after the damage his press conference had caused. He knew the Americans had the leverage now, and he knew that Eisenhower meant every word. "I accept your terms," Montgomery reportedly said. "You have my full cooperation." Eisenhower studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good, then we understand each other. This meeting is over." After Montgomery left, Eisenhower apparently sat at his desk for several minutes in silence. Then he turned to Bedell Smith and said, "I should have done that 6 months ago." Smith agreed. "The British won't like it." "The British will understand it," Eisenhower replied. "Churchill already understands it. That's why he won't fight me on this." And Eisenhower was right. When Churchill heard about the confrontation, and he heard about it quickly, his response was pragmatic. According to British records, Churchill told his military chiefs, "Eisenhower has asserted his authority. About time, I'd say. Montgomery needed to hear it." But the real proof of how completely Eisenhower had won this confrontation came in Montgomery's behavior afterward. Montgomery sent a letter to Eisenhower, drafted no doubt under pressure from Churchill, expressing full confidence in Eisenhower's leadership and pledging complete cooperation. The letter was stiff and formal, but it was a public acknowledgement of Eisenhower's authority. More importantly, Montgomery's influence over American forces effectively ended that day. For the rest of the war, Montgomery commanded British and Canadian forces in the northern sector, but he no longer had any say over American strategy or operations. When American forces prepared to cross the Rhine, Montgomery wasn't consulted. When the final push into Germany was planned, Bradley and Patton had direct access to Eisenhower, while Montgomery got his orders like any other subordinate commander. The demotion was subtle but unmistakable. Montgomery had been put in his place, and everyone in the Allied command structure knew it. So why does this confrontation matter? Why should we care about a private meeting between two generals 80 years ago? Because it reveals something crucial about leadership in coalition warfare. Sometimes diplomacy fails, and when it does, you need the courage to exercise raw authority. Eisenhower had spent months, years really, managing egos, mediating disputes, and keeping the alliance together through patience and compromise. He'd absorbed criticism, deflected blame, and made himself the target of complaints from all sides. But there comes a point when compromise becomes weakness, when patience becomes enabling, when diplomatic niceness allows toxic behavior to continue. Montgomery had crossed that line. His ego, his ambition, and his inability to accept that Britain was the junior partner in the alliance had created a genuine crisis. American generals were threatening to resign, the press was questioning Allied unity, the command structure was becoming dysfunctional. Eisenhower recognized that maintaining the alliance required him to stop being diplomatic and start being dominant. He had to assert absolute authority, even if it meant humiliating a senior British commander and risking Churchill's displeasure. And it worked. Not because Montgomery suddenly became cooperative, he remained difficult until the end of the war, but because everyone in the Allied command structure now understood that Eisenhower was truly in charge, that his authority was absolute, and that challenging that authority had consequences. This confrontation also reveals the shifting balance of power within the Anglo-American alliance. In 1942-43, when America was still building up its forces, British commanders like Montgomery could exercise considerable influence over Allied strategy. Churchill could push back on American proposals. British military experience and British resources gave them significant leverage. But by January 1945, that balance had shifted completely. American forces outnumbered British forces 3-1. American industrial production was supplying not just American armies, but British armies as well. And American casualties were mounting far faster than British casualties. The political reality was that America was now the dominant partner, and Britain was increasingly the junior partner. Montgomery's inability or refusal to accept this reality had made him a liability. Eisenhower's confrontation was, in effect, the moment when this new reality was made explicit and non-negotiable. It wasn't just about Montgomery's behavior, it was about establishing that American leadership of the alliance was absolute. Churchill understood this, which is why he didn't fight Eisenhower on it. The British Prime Minister knew that maintaining the alliance required accepting American dominance, even when it meant one of Britain's most famous generals being put firmly in his place. Montgomery never forgot that confrontation. In his post-war memoirs, he was notably restrained in his criticism of Eisenhower, unusual for Montgomery, who was generally quite free with his criticisms. When asked about it years later, Montgomery would say only that Eisenhower made his authority clear and that he respected the chain of command. But those who knew Montgomery recognized this uncharacteristic humility for what it was. the mark of a man who'd been definitively defeated in a contest of wills. Eisenhower, for his part, rarely mentioned the confrontation publicly. He understood that maintaining good post-war relations with Britain required not humiliating Montgomery unnecessarily. In his own memoirs, Eisenhower is diplomatic about Montgomery's contributions and carefully avoids detailing their conflicts. But in private conversations, Eisenhower was more candid. He told one aide that the confrontation with Montgomery was one of the hardest things I had to do during the war, but also one of the most necessary. I liked Monty in many ways. He was brilliant, dedicated, and genuinely cared about his men. But he couldn't see beyond his own ego, and in a coalition war, that's disqualifying. January 1945. In a private office in Versailles, Ike just stopped being diplomatic and started being dominant. He told Bernard Montgomery, in effect, if not in exact words, to shut up or get out. It was the moment when patience ran out and authority had to be asserted. The moment when coalition warfare gave way to unambiguous command. The moment when the greatest American general of World War II made it clear that Allied unity mattered more than British pride. Montgomery stayed, but from that day forward, his influence was finished. Eisenhower had won, not through brilliance or popularity, but through the raw exercise of authority when it mattered most. And the lesson remains relevant today. Sometimes leadership requires setting aside diplomacy and making it absolutely clear who's in charge, even if it means telling your most difficult subordinate to fall in line or get out. If this story revealed a side of Eisenhower you never knew existed, smash that like button and drop a comment. Was Eisenhower right to confront Montgomery this way, or should he have handled it differently? Don't forget to subscribe. We're bringing you the explosive confrontations that changed history every week.